application models, you should be familiar with like what is bare metal, what is virtualization, what are containers, what do we mean when we say monolithic versus these types of microservice type apps that are scalable like this. So that sort of thing. Okay, the basics of Docker, right? So we had a Docker assignment. We should be familiar with, what it is, where it fits, what different components of it are, like as we see here. So again, just the basics of the facts, how it works. Right, so you should know, I'm not going to ask you anything about Puppet and Chef, but you should be familiar with the basics of Ansible. You should know the difference between declarative and imperative when we talk about coding. Let's see, so the basics of RSA and key pairs and how that stuff works, you should also be familiar with, just in general. All right. Any questions on that material from the first lecture? All right, moving along. All right, so the networking stuff. Okay, so there might be another network IP addressing question. I think maybe some people missed that, so you got to make sure people are able to do that. So the IPv6, we covered that, yeah, I guess we did. So yeah, you should know the basics of IPv6. How the addressing works, what the rules are.
Professor, we can see your screen.
We can see your share file.
What? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Is there a comment?
You are not share.
We can't see your screen.
All right, well, I'm going to continue then. So we have the enterprise data center. So you should know what layers are which and what they're responsible for. So we have all the different characteristics of access, aggregation, core, right? So you should know the different features of each layer and what their characteristics are. So the basics of layer 2 versus layer 3. What is switching? What is VLAN? So maybe if you're not familiar with it, go through these slides. So the concept of, these different domains, collision domain, broadcast domain, STP domain, make sure you are familiar with these concepts, like what are the boundaries of the traffic that's going through these, switches. So the basics of the VLAN architecture you should be familiar with. What is a VLAN trunk? What do we mean by .1Q? Just like, what is it? What is VTP? So you don't have to know all the different modes and stuff, but you should just know what it's for. Like, what is Ether Channel 4? What is an SVI? So again, you should know what it is. But as far as, anything, you don't have to know how to configure it or anything like that, but you should just be familiar with the concept. That's the idea. And so, yeah, similarly, spanning tree, be familiar with the concept. Again, it's a good idea to understand this poem. It's useful to remember how the algorithm works. It's a nice mnemonic. So, yeah, what it is, but, I'm not going to ask you anything more than just, multiple choice type, identify the facts of this thing. All right, so you should know, what is the Linux bonding driver as far as, operating at layer 2 in Linux. Okay, so yeah, IP routing, how the OSI model maps to the TCP/IP model. Yeah, you should be familiar with that. What is TCP versus UDP? How they're different. What is an IGP versus EGP? Right, so you should be able to identify, the basics of these different IGP protocols, like which of these are link state protocols and which are distance vector protocols, that sort of thing. Right, so like we say here, what is distance vector? What is link state? These are important concepts in networking. What is BGP? What's it used for? What is classful versus classless routing? What are the address classes and how they're mapped out? Like, and what is the RFC 1918 address space that you see here in the bottom? All right, yeah, so you should be familiar with the different address blocks in RFC 1918, what RFC 1918 is, how subnetting works. All right, so there might be a subnetting question. All right, so yeah, the different routing algorithms, and so you can see, which one of these are link state, which ones are distance vector. You should be, other than that, I'm not going to ask you much any more detail, but that you should be familiar with. What is AS? Autonomous systems. What is an internet backbone and peering, and what are the different tiers, and what are their functions? What are the different characteristics of QoS? Like, what is jitter? What is error rate, right? So you might have, a mix and match type thing for the definitions and these terms, for example, something like that. Let's see. What is P95? That's a good thing to know about. What is CAN and TCAN? Like, how is that different from normal memory? What are the three layers, management, control, and data planes that we talked about here? What is a clause network? What is a three-layer traditional network architecture, leaf-spine? So I'm not going to ask you anything specific about Cisco ACI, but yeah, okay, so you should know all these different virtual networking components and what they mean. Like, what is VRF? What's it used for? We talked about that. Let's see. All right, so the different types of layer 2 VPNs, like VPLS, we talked about. Pseudo-wire. Layer 3 VPNs, the different types here. The different types of topologies, hub-spoke, point-to-point, full mesh. The different types of security and how they map to different communication layers. So you should be familiar with that. The different types of VPN encryption and authentication that we talked about. So you should be familiar with these. Let's see. What is unified communication? And, what are the different components? What is intent-based networking? Like, what do you mean by that? Just the general concept and definition. What are the different network functions and what do they do? So DNS versus NTP versus firewall. Like, what are the different types of firewalls? What are the different types of access lists? And how do they work? What's the difference between a blacklist and a whitelist, for example? What are the different types of NAT? Inside, outside, global, local. So you should understand the differences between these concepts. What is static NAT versus dynamic NAT versus address translation? What does that mean? So you should be familiar with those definitions. So yeah, you might be tested on the definitions of these acronyms. It's always good to know acronyms. This is, a good widely used terms. So just be aware of what these different groups are. Like, what is the IETF responsible for? That's a very important internet organization. What is the ICANN? What is IAMA? And ISOC. So you just be familiar with what these different things are and what their responsibilities are. So yeah, just be aware of these different open networking organizations that we talked about, but not in any great detail, just what they are. So what is SNMP? If you're not familiar, maybe check out that link to the PDF file. There's more detail there if you're not familiar with it. You don't have to know the RFC numbers, but just understand what is NetConf and what is Yang and what are they used for. Not much here that you're going to know, so I'm not going to ask any of those specific things. So yeah, and there's some definitions here. So yeah, you should know, at least go through these definitions in the glossary and at least understand these abbreviations and the definitions for them if you haven't seen them already.